Now, the United Nations projects that Africa will account for a quarter of the world's population by the year 2050, with an average of 60% of Africans falling under the age of 24. Now, this young population poses both an opportunity and a ticking time bomb if the potential of the youth is not fully harnessed. Paul Adefarasin, founder and president of the Rock Foundation and Metropolitan Senior Pastor of the House on the Rock Churches, joins me to discuss the role of leadership in Africa's journey to maximize the potential of its youth. Let's talk about leadership. And these days, obviously, it's not just leadership, or visionary leadership, which is what many political analysts tell us that we need, or that we lack even across the continent. What are your thoughts in terms of leadership, and how the youth can also be a part of it?
Political class in Africa, generally they have a vision, but the vision is very self-centered, and it's more about the individual who is the appointed or elected leader. Whereas leadership now has to become visionarily inclusive of the whole country, where we're not sectional or divisional, but more so integrative of the national whole, the African whole, where we're looking at the country as a whole, so that you have Nigerians as opposed to Yorubas, Igbos, Hausas, Kanuris, and Efiks. I asked my congregation, tell me, where are you from? How many Yorubas, how many Igbos, how many Hausas, how many Kanuris, Fulani, etc. We saw all kinds of hands go up. I said, that's the problem. The Nigerian problem is that we don't have Nigerians. But
many may say that, that still gives them a sense of identity, and
well, it's
they're
a matter
proud
of
of
priority.
their cultural heritage or whatever.
I think priority should be, we should be Nigerians first, especially with where Nigeria is today, and then ethnically diverse second. Otherwise, we keep driving a sectional dream rather than harnessing the holistic possibility of Nigeria's many diversities, harnessed together to produce our development and progress.
But how do we, that's the situation we found ourselves in. How do we break out of that? Because that also determines, even at the presidential level, power going to the north, power coming back to the south.
Again, that is the challenge. I think it shouldn't be north, south, east, or west. It should be competence, ability, capacity, the ability to create pictures in people's minds of an imminent reality in the future that is good, positive, progressive, a genuine dividend to the Nigerian whole. Somebody who can articulate that, picture it, show us the roadmap, how to get there, and staff his team in such a way that that competence on the team is able to deliver that reality. That's how Britain emerged in the times of a Cromwell or a Churchill, or how South Africa emerged as the rainbow nation from that terrible ill called apartheid by the emergence of Nelson Mandela, who was just a representative of a larger team of people who shared his ideas and ideals. And Nigeria needs that. And I believe that there are people about to break forth out of this mayhem that we suffer in Nigeria, because great leaders generally emerge out of great crisis. And we have to be able to identify them, those of us who resonate strongly with the critical mass of young people who are the teeming majority in Nigeria, and say you have to be responsible in how you select your leaders come 2019.
I was just going to say that, because when you say that we need a Nelson Mandela, so I was going to ask, does that mean we just sit down, fold our arms, twiddle our thumbs until we have that one person who can break out from the crowd, from the voices, and say, you know what, I will make the difference and you all can follow and help me achieve it?
I think it's going to happen, but we have to adjust the political process, or aggressively, not violently, but aggressively, peacefully, but aggressively, re-engineer the political process and create movements. And the movements will eventually morph into political structure that can begin to represent the teeming masses of young people who feel frustrated, ignored, completely depleted, robbed of their future. And that's going to happen sooner or later. Otherwise, the opposite will happen. Nigeria will fail completely.
So, still in leadership, we are going into a political year, 2018/2019. What are your expectations, or what are you seeing now in terms of mobilization? Right now, we only have two main political parties, but then there's still that strong youth voice, especially in social media, Twitter. We're expecting that to play a big role in terms of the whole process, who votes for who, or who is recognized, etc. What are your expectations in terms of how that plays out?
Regrettably, Esther, I think it's a very steep climb. It's a difficult road to trek, and it's going to be a hard trudge. But if real leaders can emerge that are willing to lay their lives down and challenge the status quo, then we may see real change. The problem with Nigeria is also that the critical mass is uneducated or substandardly educated, so that they really don't know how to hold the leaders accountable. But I believe that amidst us, there will be some genuinely strong and articulate leaders that will emerge. They'll find each other, and it's not about any particular one getting to the fore, but the ideals of the movements, the ideas of the movements coming to the fore and being properly represented by their leaders. I could enumerate 10, 20 powerful young men and women who are articulate. They're brilliant orators, brilliant capacity builders, brilliantly resonate with the populace and can drive a movement. But the political process doesn't allow those kind of people to rise. Because to rise in a political process in our continent, you have to be about the things that the political class idealize, loot.
Now, in all of this, we have, it's not just the voices of the youth. We have civil society organizations, we have, religious bodies, we have, NGOs, people who voice out, the need for a change against corruption, against, theft, as it were. So I'm just thinking, those voices, would you say they've been effective?
I think in small pockets they are effective, but all the power levers are with the appointed, elected political leadership. And somehow we have to make government accountable to ensure that the regulatory institutions are independent from government and that they are also influenced by civil societies, NGOs, and people who prescribe a genuine value system upon which Nigeria can grow. That has to begin to happen. It's your sector that has to play an important role there, because you are the media, you are the fourth realm. If you are not compromised, then your voice cannot be muzzled or muffled. And the media have a very important role. We took the military dictatorships out of office, really, because of the media based right here in this city. And I think the media has the challenge to amplify, filter the voice of the NGOs, the civil societies, the faith-based communities, to say we demand better from our governments.
Now, one of the reasons has been given for why we have poor leadership, in the last couple of decades, is because there's been a major decline in our value system, what we hold dear as our values that define us as a people, as Nigerians. I would like you to speak to that fact, looking at our value system, how it's crumbled, and how we can begin to maybe national reorientation in terms of what we should hold there as our values, honesty, teaching our youth especially, which is also part of the focus of this conversation today, teaching our youth that to do right is still the right thing to do, and not that you can do wrong and then get away with it, which appears to be what holds sway now.
We have a hydra-headed crisis of values in the country, and we could highlight several of them. But one that I'm really concerned about is our Nigerianness. We tend to be more ethnic, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Fulfude, or Fulani, Efik, Ibibio, and we're really not Nigerians. The Nigerian dream, the Nigerian personality hasn't really emerged. And in my faith-based value system, loving my brother doesn't make me a genuine and authentic example of what a child of God ought to be. It's loving those who posture as my enemies. And we teach Christians that love those who dispose themselves to you as enemies, and then according to Matthew chapter 5, you will be the true children of your Father that is in heaven. And this, I think, we need to really develop, because the tensions, the cleavages between the different ethnicities in the country are really what have contributed in a significant way to the poor political process and the poor deliverables that the political class are supposed to deliver to the Nigerian dream. And when we can cross that barrier, we won't be talking about the ping pong between North and South. The issue will be competence, delivering competent leaders into political office, into leadership office, so that we can transform the economy, and by a transformed economy, give opportunity back to the people, to the masses, and let the masses be part of determining their own future, not just a few small, minuscule percentile determining where the country ends up because of where they want to go personally.
Many have turned around and blamed the church, blamed political bodies, for many of the problems we have in the country, especially our value system. What do you say to those who say that, look, the church, political bodies also have a key role to play, and they have failed in that role?
What, the churches, you mean the church's role in being the conscience of the nation.
Perhaps, yes.
I think we certainly take a lot of the blame. I think the church can do better, as in all aspects of Nigeria can do better. But I think in every sector, you will still find a remnant, a group of people who still hold to good values, who have good exposure to what is right and understand the difference between right and wrong. And those should come under the spotlight and become proponents of the ideals that we should hold dear to. Transparency is hugely important. Accountability. Understanding that leadership is not lordship, but it's meant to be servant leadership. That if you're in political office, you are a servant. You're, no better way to say it, you're the houseboy of the country. I was in London the other day, and I saw the Chancellor riding a bicycle on a side street. I saw an MP get onto a bus. That tells you something about leadership styles elsewhere that I think African peoples must begin to emulate. The king traditionally in Africa is lord and master, but in civil systems elsewhere in the world, the political leader is servant. And that's something that Nigeria needs to get, and he's accountable to his master. His master is not an individual, but the corporate whole of the democratic mass.
That was Paul Adefarasin, founder and president of the Rock Foundation and Metropolitan Senior Pastor of the House on the Rock Churches. As we continue our discussion on leadership and lessons for Africa, still with me is Paul Adefarasin, founder and president of the Rock Foundation. Let's talk about some of the work that the Rock Foundation does. I know that you have a focus on youth also. Tell us about that.
Okay. We're involved as a socially responsible hand from the community stretched out to help those who have need, who are struggling, who have major challenges. So we're in the prisons, providing healthcare, providing legal aid, providing reabsorption into society, and helping the families of those who are incarcerated to cope with the circumstances and the situation, and to help them find faith, so that in faith they can find hope for a future within the prison walls whilst they're still there, and plan a future for them when they come out of prison. And that's important, because some of these folk who are imprisoned are there simply because they wrote down the number of a policeman, or were walking on the sidewalk during the environmental, and they're in for 7 years, 6 years. Their case hasn't been arraigned before a court, and if they don't get representation and legal aid, they will remain there. And that's a terrible existence. So we're in there doing a lot with them. The Lagos State Judiciary appointed our foundation as the lead in terms of leading the rest of faith-based communities in helping to deal with the issue of unlawful or improper incarceration. And we're also in the healthcare provision space, helping to serve as a catalyst to other faith-based communities and assisting government to provide healthcare to all and sundry. So we started a mobile clinic system that will go to each of the 48 local governments, and hopefully we'll have about 30 of those within the next 3 years. And we'll educate as it concerns healthcare, diagnose, treat, and then do referrals where we are incompetent to deliver that healthcare in things like cataract, surgery, etc. Then we've just given the state government 100 computer laboratories over a period of maybe 6-7 years. We would go into a Lagos State school, take a room, maybe double the size of this, re-kit it completely, furnish it, resurface all the walls, air condition it, provide a generator, and then put in about 30 desktops, a server, and air conditioning. And then brought in Hewlett-Packard for the hardware and Microsoft for the software and the programs. And this helps to bridge the digital divide between the poor and the middle class, so that they have an opportunity to learn, because with a desktop you can see the world. The governor was really delighted to see the faith-based community doing that. Now, we can't deal with the entire problem, but we can serve as a catalyst to encourage others to do the same, because the responsibility cannot only be government. We all have to put hands on the deck. Then we feed the poor, and especially in seasons like this, we're feeding 20,000 people over December, and ensuring that they can have a meal every day for at least a 3-week period during the Christmas season, and that they don't see the church as what it's often portrayed as, but we are a social net. We're a social security system for the communities in which we we are housed. And this is hugely important. My words have no impact or no meaning unless my heart is seen in the way my hands are outstretched to help the needy. They will not hear the good news of Nigeria's possibility if we don't solve some of their immediate challenges. And then we provide education in different ways, and this is not unique to any one local church, but the Christian church, the faith-based communities have always been a part of educating Nigeria, and we shouldn't lose sight of that responsibility in these times. We must continue, as difficult and as hefty a sacrifice as it might be. And that's true religion, and undefiled is to lend a hand to the widow, to the distaff, to the orphan, which the church communities all do, and we are certainly a big part of that. And it's an important point that resonates with the youth, that somebody cares about them. Now, government must be part of that caring system, but the faith-based communities ought to lead in the vanguard of that, because that's why we're on earth.
Okay. When you think about the youth, African youth, Nigerian youth, you look into the future, what do you see?
With the pessimistic view, it looks quite hopeless. But because I'm a man of faith, there is a possibility that one spark somewhere on the continent may create a massive movement. Martin Luther King got up and started talking. God arranged the circumstances, and as a result, he rose and became a voice that not only changed the lot for African America, but that came across the pond and became the independence movement in India and in all of Africa. And we found our independence, we fought for our independence, but we've abused the opportunity of being independent states. And now comes another opportunity in the midst of darkness and crisis for leaders to emerge. And our prayers are that great leaders like yourself will emerge and use your bully pulpits to insist on a better Nigeria, on a better Africa, and on the very best serving the rest, not the worst, lording it over the rest.
Earlier I talked about underrepresentation. Many African youth feel that they're underrepresented. They look at their leaders and they see that their leaders are, well advanced in age. And it would seem that that is still the issue with Nigeria. We have leaders. I know we've talked a lot about that. But I'm just thinking in terms, some leaders argue, my mind goes to Mr. Alpha Conde. He's the president of the African Union. Mm-hmm. He's also the president of Guinea. And he says that age is not the problem. All you need to do is know what the problems of the youth are and be able to solve them. He said the 30-year-old can be president and not have a clue on how to deal with the problems of the youth. But,
There's a bit of truth to what he says. But I find myself being educated by my 11-year-old because he has unfettered access to information, to knowledge on an accelerated level that we didn't know about. He's 11 going on 40 because of the technological age we live in. They must have a voice because they have a rounder worldview than we do. And often when you get to 40, you've come to conclusions and you've become somewhat set in your ways. You have one way of doing things, and you're not diverse in your application to methodology. And I think that this is why, at worst, we should have the hearts of the fathers turn to their children, and the hearts of the children turn to their fathers, and at the very worst, have a collaborative force of the combined effort and synergy of two generations, not where it's people who are outdated and should really go to the back benches determining our decisions. No, it shouldn't be like that. We can't keep using our reference points or taking our reference point from the past if we're trying to engender a future, because the future cannot have a reference point to the past.
Do you see that also being reflected in the policies that we have, both especially economic, policies that are progressive? Do you think that we don't have that?
Absolutely. I think that's half of the problem. I've listened to great minds like Kingsley Mohalu, he's a mentor to me as it concerns economics. I'm an absolute ignoramus as it concerns economics, but listening to people like him, it makes an awful lot of good sense. And it's practical sense that can be practicalized if people like that have opportunity to provide their ideas and to help implement those ideas, to help generate a stronger economy. And this is a man from the young age, and he'll remain young for the simple reason that he's constantly studying. He's constantly reading. You can't be a great leader if you're not a great reader.
That's one issue that has been brought up also, our reading culture. Do we have youth who read, who try to advance themselves, especially in that area? What have you seen so far? What's been your experience?
The reading systems have changed. You can acquire a lot of knowledge in a slightly different way from the way we acquired knowledge in our time.
True.
Because things come to you in sound bites, and the youth don't have that that large an attention span. You've got to be able to say it succinctly, powerfully, and practically in 5 minutes. And if you can't, you lose their attention. So they read in sound bites, but they assimilate an awful lot of information that quickly. My son is an encyclopedia at 11. When I need to know something, I go to him. And that's a trend that the world has to watch out for. Across Europe, I think we have 5 leaders that are sub 43. And they're making a big difference, because knowledge is not the preserve of the aged. The Bible says there's a spirit in man, the breath of the Almighty gives understanding to the simple or to the young. And in this age where knowledge is accelerated and the writing of books is many, and that comes to us with such bombardment, it's hard to avoid knowledge when you're young, because you're bombarded with it from everywhere. I have an iPhone, and before 10 a.m. in the morning, I am loaded with information, educative videos, news items that I have to learn how to filter the good, the bad from the ugly. Yeah.
Now, a lot has been said about the role Nigeria would play or could play at the world stage, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, based on, a lot of it is based on how we industrialize, how fast we industrialize, and how fast we're able to get solve our governance and leadership issues. But what do you say? I've asked you about the youth, but for Nigeria, we as a nation, Nigeria as a country,
it's a huge window. It has opened and it is closing. If we don't get into the window before it closes, Nigeria will lose all her opportunities, and her opportunity to serve Africa and make Africa great, truly great again, will be lost on all of us. And that's a huge responsibility. Anybody going into government today must have that kind of conscience, that it's not about me amassing millions to myself, it's about me delivering wealth to a continent, to a people, and maximizing opportunity. Isn't it a travesty, or a tragedy rather, that we are perhaps the richest continent in terms of resources on the face of the earth, and yet the poorest people dwell here? Europe is one of the poorest continents as far as natural resources are concerned, and then the wealthiest people dwell there. There's been a trafficking of our resources because we failed to add value. We failed to do the responsible thing with our people and teach them how to add value by giving them viable education systems that help them to be value adders to the resources that we have. We are so rich that we haven't been able to expend our resources.
Finally, we have about 10 seconds left. 2019 elections, election year coming. Are you holding out some kind of hope? I don't know.
I certainly am holding out some kind of hope. I certainly am, but the populace must be more thorough in ensuring that whoever they elect, whoever they choose, must understand economics, must be able to marry political leadership with vibrant, vigorous economic policy that is truly transformational. If they can't do that, vote for somebody else. And if you can't find anybody to vote for, be the one they vote for. Make a movement, create something. We may not get there in one day, but we may get there in good time.
Paul Adefarasin, founder and president of the Rock Foundation and Metropolitan Senior Pastor of the House on the Rock Churches.